When he says, I'm going to take responsibility, that's when his senior staff know one of them's going to get shot.
That's exactly right.
I'm going to take responsibility and shoot him.
It's a very bitter pill for me to swallow, but I will have to do it. After all, I am the leader.
Yes, that's right.
The presenting sponsor for Socially Democratic is Dunn Street. Dunn Street is a campaign agency that specialises in community organising. We only work with people and organisations who want to build power to make the world a better place. And if you want to create change in your world in 2026, then hit us up at dunstreet.com.au. A special shout out to all of our Patreon members. If you want to join those wonderful supporters of our podcast and financially support our show so we can continue to produce great episodes every week, then we encourage you to click on the link in the show notes and subscribe to join the Patreon community of Socially Democratic. And finally, today's episode is brought to you by Maurice Blackburn Lawyers. For over a century, Maurice Blackburn has stood up for fairness, championing the rights of everyday Australians and shaping landmark legal reforms. Today, they're harnessing new technologies to make justice more accessible, more efficient, and more responsive to the needs of modern Australia. All right, let's get on with today's episode. We are taping this one on a Tuesday evening on the lands of the Wurundjeri people. Last week, voters across the United Kingdom went to the polls for English Council elections, the Scottish Parliamentary elections, and the Welsh Senate elections, and it was the first one. It was a significant test at the ballot box for Keir Starmer's Labor government, and to put it bluntly, things didn't go so well. Labor lost councils across England, suffered their worst result in Scotland in a while, and in Wales for the first time in over a century, Labor is no longer the largest party. Reform UK has surged, the Greens and the Lib Dems made gains, and now there are open calls inside the Parliamentary Labour Party for the Prime Minister to go. So just what happened? What does it mean for Labor, for Keir Starmer, and for British politics in general? And what should a social democratic government actually do when the ground starts shifting beneath them? So to help us pick all of this apart, I've got two guests who know politics like the back of their hand. John McTernan is a former senior political advisor to the British Prime Minister Tony Blair and the Director of Communications for Australian Prime Minister Julia Gillard. John, great to see you back on the show.
Great to be back.
And David Feeney, former State Secretary of Victorian Labor and a former member of the Federal Parliament. And obviously David has been a regular voice on this show, and he is very keen to weigh into the UK election results. So, David, great to have you back on the show.
Thank you very much. And if I can just, people might think from your remarks that you're interviewing two people tonight, one who's worked in both countries and is extremely qualified, and me. And so I guess just to lay out my credentials to comment on the United Kingdom, I'd refer you to a decision of the High Court in 2018, which found that I was a British citizen, having inherited British citizenship from my grandfather. And so while I'd never been to the United Kingdom or ever held a United Kingdom passport, I have since 2018 regarded it as the mother country. And so I think that entitles me tonight to wax lyrical about a subject where, I'm full of opinion and, others will provide questions of fact and detail.
Speaking of passports, David, I'll let you know now, which is this may be some twist of irony. If you ever do want to return back to the mother country, you have to go and get your British passport. You cannot enter into the United Kingdom if you are a British citizen, even though you may have been born elsewhere. You have to get your passport. I discovered this at Easter.
I have a decision of the High Court that I can just hand them.
I discovered it over Christmas.
Anything you want, you actually need it.
Well, you're going to have to go get your passport again, even though you handed it back.
How ironic would it be if I can't get a passport and I can't sit in the Parliament at the same time?
The law sits.
The law is an ass.
Anyway, I've got my Irish passport, so I can because it's a common travel area. I don't need any additional proof. I can use British or Irish passports.
Very good.
There was a war fought and then a treaty, and that's why you can get them.
Yeah, I think there was a bit of a hullabaloo about that treaty, as I recall.
Well, there's been a hullabaloo last week in UK elections, and I think what we'll do for our listeners at home, we're going to unpack it in this particular order. I'm also saying this to make sure our guests follow this. We'll start with Scotland first, and we'll do sort of results and then sort of top line analysis. Then we'll go to Wales and then England, and then kind of have a broader conversation about what this means at a national level, and then move into the leadership contest that's happening right now. Well, is happening, isn't happening, who knows? With the Labour Party,
it's definitely on. It's on.
It's definitely happening. Yes.
It's on and it's concluded at the same time.
Oh, interesting. Okay.
Yeah.
I feel like I'm burying the lead now. Okay, let's go to let's persist and start with your and my home nation of Scotland, John.
Yep.
So there were the Scottish parliamentary elections held simultaneously with the other ones. There's 129 seats in the Scottish Parliament, 73 constituency seats, and there are 56 regional. It's a very similar system to the New Zealand and German parliaments. 65
with a track record of success in both of those jurisdictions that should be remembered, shouldn't it?
Yeah.
Weimar,
Yeah. 65 needed for a majority. Turnout was at 53.2%, down from the 2021 elections at 63.5%. The results, the SNP, the Scottish National Party, gained 58 seats. That's a change of 6. Labor had 17. They'd lost 5. Correct me if I'm wrong right here, John. I think it's our worst ever result in Holyrood. Reform contesting for the very first time picked up 17 seats. The Greens picked up 8. Best result for them ever. That takes them to 15. The Conservatives, the Tories, lost 19 seats, took them down to 12. Worst ever result in Holyrood. And the Lib Dems gained 6 seats, taking them to 10. And that's actually, I'm not going to do the vote share. We'll do that a bit later on because we'll talk about what that means. But sort of headline shocks for this election in Scotland, John, what's the top line things that we need to be aware of here?
I suppose the top line is Scottish politics now resembles English politics and Welsh politics. It's a battle between two populist parties, one broadly social democratic and one far right. In Scotland, it's the SNP and it's Reform. In Wales, it's Plaid Cymru, the Nationalist Party, and Reform, far-right party. And in England, it's a contest on paper between the Greens, populist left party, and Reform, a populist far-right party. And so there's a fragmentation of British politics where in almost every seat, 5 or 6 candidates represent parties that are viable. But in Scotland, Labour failed again. There's now nearly 20 years since Labour have been a contender in Scotland. Labour failed again to find a way to fight nationalists. And it's because they fall into the frame of trying to out-nationalist them, to out-Scottish them, and you cannot put sufficient kilts onto Scottish Labour to make it a viable choice. If you want nationalism, you'll go for the real thing. And the SNP had a collapse in their vote, their popular vote significantly fell, but they're in the mid-30s, I think, in the popular vote, but they've got nearly 60% of the seats in the Parliament, so nearly 50% of the seats in the Parliament.
Is it possible that this nationalist surge is a function of tactical voting by voters who vote for a candidate they perceive to be most likely to defeat Reform?
See, there's an element of that, definitely. But I also think that the by-election last year, which Labour won in the Scottish Parliament, Reform came second. That by-election was in the heart of the central belt of Scotland. Is the area that fell in 2007, fell from Scottish Labour to the SNP, has never come back. And it's broadly, if the traditional working class voters in England are the red wall, this was the tartan wall. And in my view, Reform have a huge appeal to working class voters in Scotland. They made a really big tactical decision. They chose to identify themselves as unionist, identify with the Rangers Football Club, and therefore could only appeal to a portion of the working class in Scotland. The SNP's tactical genius was to basically become homophobic, to get the backing of the Catholic Church. They opposed the repeal of homophobic legislation in the Scottish Parliament early on after devolution, and they aligned themselves with.
Well, and that from a party that
was
sort of hyper woke not that long ago.
Well, they've shifted ground, but Nicola Sturgeon opposed civil partnerships for gay men and lesbians, and that settlement with the socially conservative element of the working class in Scotland was a critical part of the SNP's early success. And I think Reform would have done better if they'd just gone, do you know what? We're nationalists like you, but we're really socially conservative nationalists, not like you, the SNP. You've lost your way. You've believed in all these woke issues. But Reform made the error of deciding to identify themselves as unionists, identify with the Rangers side of the market, the Rangers supporting side of the market, and that meant they couldn't grow as fast and as hard. Because, look, in my view, there are two types of nationalism being offered now in Scotland: a Scottish nationalism and an English nationalism or a British nationalism. And in a debate about nationalism, a Labour Party gets totally squeezed out. And David's right. Some people thought, let's vote SNP to stop Reform because they're far-right nationalists or they're whatever. But it was really that Labour need to always find a question that's not a constitutional question. If they'd fought on, say, we want to bring 3 new nuclear power stations to Scotland, that would have been a massive row. It would have been 50,000 jobs a power station. It would have been clean energy, but in a very modern kind of industrial way. It would have been a fight with the Greens, who'd have to go, well, we're against nuclear, but actually we're for carbon neutral energy, which nuclear is. It would be a fight on a tradition in Scotland. Scotland used to provide 40% of all nuclear power. So Labour have been unable to change the frame and change the question. And if the question is who will stand up for Scotland, the SNP will always win.
Because I feel like, was it Humza Yousaf kind of led the SNP into an ideological la-la land where his political fortunes were tied up in defending men leading rape crisis centres and insisting that men go into women's prisons. And the electorate deserted him. And the SNP, which had become neither Scottish nor nationalist nor organised as a party, was in ruins. And this, of course, was a blessing for Labor. But now I feel like they've got some kind of, because of the travails of the Labor Party more generally, they've got out of jail. They've escaped the extinction that they were meant to endure, and they're back.
Yeah, look, that is right. There were no party should be re-elected after 20 years in office, really. It's time for a change. The issue for Labour was that the election was too early. The change election was July 2024. And so Labour won a bucket load of seats in Scotland. Labour won so well in Scotland that its national proportion of the vote was 34%, not ideal, but 2% of that vote was Scotland. So without Scotland, Labour would have been on 32%, so a far less respectable number. We were then the change to the Tories and the change to the SNP in one go. And then this election comes 2 years into a Labour first term, which we'll come back to, which has been deeply disappointing and alienating for so many voters on so many different levels, that the SNP were able to present themselves as don't change, it would be worse, because Labour now are the worst option. Had Andy Burnham not been blocked for standing in the Gorton-Denton by-election in the early part of the year, then I think all the politics would have looked different. I think Andy could have been able to make an appeal to Scottish voters and to Welsh voters, said, look, we know you've been thinking of not voting for us, but actually the Labour Party heard you in advance and we've changed. And I think the whole landscape would have been different. But this defeat in Scotland and the defeat in Wales, defeat in England, they were deliberately engineered by Number 10 Downing Street. They were deliberately chosen by Keir Starmer and his Chief of Staff, Morgan McSweeney. It was their choice, and they delivered.
The thing that I'm slightly confused about is, and to your point before about the change election for Scotland happened at the last general election for Westminster. And I was in Scotland was it 2024, and there was that there was a Holyrood by-election in sort of not Motherwell, not Lanark, but that area just sort of, it's
Hamilton.
Yeah, Hamilton, that's right, yeah.
Hamilton by-election.
And I remember meeting with folks on that campaign, and they were feeling bullish about that by-election. They won that by-election. They were, Anasawa, the leader, was popular, doing well in the polls. They weren't in a commanding position, but they were now relevant. They were back in the game, and they were feeling good about things, and taking the seat off the SNP would have been an important step, and they did secure that. And I think at the time there were some folks privately saying to me, we don't want Keir to come up here. We think he's going to be a drag on the ticket. And then it got to a point then when things got so bad for Labor in Westminster that they started to publicly distancing themselves. I always wonder the value in doing that, because I think that by distancing yourself from a party leader, albeit in Westminster, and we do it here in Australia as well, like, we don't insert federal Labor leader to come to our state.
Yeah, no, I know.
But ultimately, you're damaging the party brand.
Ultimately, you're one brand.
Yeah.
One brand, one party, and you rise and you fall, and which is why I would have picked a devolution issue like energy, where the SNP say they want to oppose nuclear energy, one where it splits the Greens, it splits working class people, and it's one in which Westminster has a locus and has power because it does energy policy. And it's just like, you have to find a frame in which you at least can have a contest. You could have still come through, but very late on, Anna Sarwar called for Keir Starmer to stand down. But it was a classic of its kind, which is, if you're going to jump off a 20-story building, you need to all hold hands and jump off together. He went first, promised that somebody was coming after him, and sorry. And so he looked weak. And the thing is, strong weak is one of the big binaries in Scottish politics, binaries in UK politics, any politics. Once you start looking weak, people don't want to be associated with you. And that's happening in the UK scale too. Even the strong things Keir Starmer's done, like not go to war with the Americans, look weak because everybody thinks he's weak.
Okay.
And so Labour wanted to change. Labour were weak. Labour couldn't find the right frame.
Let's take a look at Wales quickly and talk about the results there. It's the first election under this new system where there are 96 seats up from 60, 49 needed for a majority. Plaid Cymru, which is the Welsh National Party, collected 43 seats, they are the largest party in Wales for the very first time. Reform UK, 34, Labor 9, a historic collapse. And even when, no matter how bad things were going for Labor in British national politics, even under the dark years of Jeremy Corbyn, Welsh Labor was still the bastion of the Labor Party.
Yep.
And the Greens 2, Lib Dems 1. And so it turns out that the Plaid Cymru have got 31%-ish share of the vote. Reform UK got 29% and Labor 11%. John, what has happened in Wales for the Labor Party?
So the first thing is, I think this is definitely a situation where David is totally on the money. People chose to vote, applied to eat reform. They saw that election as two horses, and that was presaged by the Caerphilly by-election. Caerphilly by-election last year, the Labour vote just evaporated and went to Plaid, and reform got beaten. Now, what is going on? It is the biggest disaster any social democratic party has ever had anywhere in the world, because no party in any democracy has ever been the dominant party for 115 years, which Labour was, the dominant party in Wales for 115 years. Through world wars, through the Great Depression, through everything, Labour were the dominant party. And so that is a huge and historic defeat for Labour. And it's undoubtedly deserved at the core level of, you should actually judge your state or your devolved government on the quality of the services is delivered. And if you look at public services and you look at the economy, the Welsh Senate and the Welsh government have not delivered for people. And that is the core of it. Their lives have got considerably worse. Yes, the GFC, yes, the pandemic and post-pandemic and inflation and cost of living. But at its core, Welsh Labour didn't make Wales a jot better.
And an incredible debut for reform in Wales.
Yeah.
And I guess my question, I can see the kind of ethno-nationalist strand that reform encompasses. How does that play out in a nationalist context like Wales? Are they worried about mosques in Wales?
There are mosques in Wales,
right.
And as far as I know, they're still pretty loyal Labour voters. The issue in Wales is Brexit. Wales was one of the strongest Labour areas that voted to leave the European Union, which is a comment really on industrial policy and deindustrialisation. And so the valleys, I've got friends who come from the valleys now are so clean from pollution, you can fish in the rivers, but there's no jobs. So it's like the visceral trade-off is we've had investment in the environment, but no investment in our jobs. So in Wales, Reform are the party of nationalising the steel industry.
Mm-hmm.
Because they understand that government action to save an industry that is central to self-identity is really critical. And I can imagine over time, Reform becoming the party of coal seam gas. At least 2/3 and maybe more of the Welsh coal reserves have never been mined. Now, you can never go back to deep mining for all kinds of reasons, but there's still a carbon resource there. And there's something unhealed for the entirety of South Wales, I think, unhealed about the loss of the coal mining jobs and the loss of the steel jobs that connect industries and the loss of the shipping jobs. And it needs something, it needs a new grand bargain. Devolution was not that grand bargain. Devolution is a process. I'll give you some power. It wasn't we need to become a different kind of country and we've given you this leadership and these powers to do these things. And so you end up in the arguments about more powers. You'll see it. The Welsh government, the Welsh Senate, are going to be demanding more powers. And so, like, powers for what? What is your view of the kind of Wales which would be a successful 21st century economy? Labour haven't answered that in government, but I don't think either Reform or Plaid have answered it either.
Let's then move to the last set of elections, which was in England. And there were 136 council elections that were up for grabs. That's 5,066 councillors across those councils. And to give you a sense of where they were taking place, 32 London boroughs, 32 other metropolitan boroughs throughout England, plus 6 directly elected mayors. And if you break it down by council, Labor lost control of 38 councils, Reform UK gained 14 councils, the Conservatives or the Tory party lost 6 councils, the Green party gained 5 councils, the Lib Dems gained 1 council. There's 23 councils that there is no clear control by any particular party. And if we were to tally that up just based on council seats, Reform, which only had 2 before this election, now have 1,453, which seems like a lot because it is. The Labor Party lost 1,496 councillors, and now they're down to just a tick over 1,068. The Lib Dems gained 155 councillors; they're up to 844. The Tory party lost 563 councils. That took them down to 801. They're smaller than, this election anyway, smaller than the Lib Dems. The Greens picked up 411, taking them up to 587 councils, and there was an increase of 34 independent councillors, taking their tally up to 212.
And I think it's worth just pointing out that we're talking about elections which are voluntary.
Yeah.
And which are first past the post.
Yeah.
and they are council elections. So notwithstanding the fact that these are party candidates, there are, immutably tiny issues that will be of interest, local personalities, the local pub, yada, yada, yada. Because we're going to be making big brushstrokes, it's worth remembering those details.
Yeah. No, that's really true. And because it's first past the post and it's not compulsory voting, there can be very low turnouts. Although in London, turnouts were between 40 and 50%, so pretty decent turnouts. But there's five viable parties. There's the Tories, there's Reform, there's the Liberal Democrats, there's the Labour Party, there's the Greens, and actually in lots of areas in London, there are Muslim independents who won a council, Tower Hamlets, and won a mayoralty in Tower Hamlets. So 5-6, but five-party politics, 21% of the vote gives you plurality. Labour's share of the national vote is about 17%. So hard to win on that. And the big thing, probably two really strong blocks in British politics at the moment, but there's no process forcing them back together again. So first past the post. The right bloc, this was an election in which the Tory party died. Reform basically won almost all their votes from former Tory voters. The journey to Reform is complete. Reform are the party of the right of British politics. But the left of British politics, the centre left, has got the Lib Dems, the Labour Party, the Greens, and it's got the Muslim Independents. So you've got at least three, maybe four parties fighting. And the reality of Labour's losses to Reform were that mainly Labour lost votes to the Greens, which split the Labour vote enough for a Reform candidate to come through with the support of the Tory voters who moved to them. And that is obviously one where compulsory preferential would have created a very different pattern, in my view. And it's one in which what the polls say is 2% of voters who voted for Reform would consider voting Labour. A third of voters who voted for Lib Dems or for the Greens would consider voting Labour. So that's the setup, in a way, for the debate inside the Labour Party. And it's the losses in England which have caused the caucus to revolt. Just to go, you're able to see in your local area what would happen to you or what might happen to you.
Yeah. And I wonder if this first past the post factor is accelerating the decline of the Labour Party in the UK, because it's accelerating the process of people saying, well, I have to vote for somebody to beat Reform and I'm not picking Labour because they're not going to win.
So, yes, that's a factor. But the other factor does remain, these are not particularly important elections in England. They're just local councils. They collect your bins, they run the libraries, they run the parks. So that the stakes aren't that high. They can't screw up that much. Their resources are now so low, they mainly do statutory duties. So they can't get in and slash and burn. On the one hand, on the other hand, it's the simplest and most direct way you have of sending a message to the Prime Minister. If you don't vote for his party might do something. And lo and behold, within 7 days of the results coming out in full, there's a by-election and a leadership challenger has emerged. So it's like,
but doesn't it give a party sinews? Like the Reform have got 1,400 elected folk they didn't have last week, roaming the streets, going to branch meetings.
Reform got a lot of councillors. The history of Reform did really well last year, and a lot of their councillors have resigned. It's a really high number. It's like a fifth or a quarter. Same when you win big, you win with lottery winners. So in my local area, in our local parliamentary seat, there's 3 Green councillors who are 18 years old doing their A-levels, going to university. They'll have to resign. So we don't know what will happen when they stand for a by-election and if there's a change in the Labour Party. So watching Reform councils over the country, they mainly won county councils last year, they tend to act not like Reform. They tend to act like a version of their local petty bourgeoisie. So in Kent, they're very like they're very Kent. In Nottinghamshire, they're actually more racially diverse than the Tory group they replaced. So they draw more from their locality and represent more from their locality because there's still a party in formation. There's still a party who is really interesting with the energy of them when you go to their conferences and meet up with them. They're very different from what the leadership is. And the party's structured in a way, the leadership own the party, literally own the party. And so the democracy in it is very limited. But yeah,
from this great distance, they look much more like American public policy launches, with balloons and
yes,
all of the, everything short of cheerleaders, that whole festival of US style launch, which is very un-British.
That's right. I think that's right. And that American style is coming to progressive politics too. The big progressive meeting in Barcelona a couple of weeks ago was the biggest meeting of social democrats and progressives in the 21st century. And that had American conference producers producing the look and the televising and the banners. And then it had set in it Mia Mottley from Barbados and President Lula from Brazil, and then Pedro Sanchez from Spain, but all in a. So there's something about the Americanization, but there's something about you need to have razzmatazz to fill if you don't have membership, and it's not clear. And this is really interesting. It's not clear how mature the party organizations on the left and the Greens, on the right and on the right are, and what opportunities there are to split them and to make their councillors into independents, or even convert them over to becoming part of the Labour Party, to understand their community drive, their local issue that got them into politics is actually something that a Labour Party could better solve. So it's a feeling of politics in flux, but it's a system which magnifies fragmentation. And if you're not the number one, if you can't make yourself the obvious number one choice to stop reform, say, which is what the next election will be about, then the votes just scatter, and people vote on vibes as well as commentary on central government.
Is part of the success of reform in the last 12 months down to the leadership of Nigel Farage, or is it the issues that they are speaking on, or is it a bit of column A and a bit of column B?
Look, it's almost all down to Nigel Farage, who is still the most successful and most brilliant, in a way, political entrepreneur in UK politics. I mean, he's taken down the Conservative Party, who have been the most successful political party in Western Europe for nearly 200 years. Like, it's a huge achievement, and it's a lot driven by grudge. If they'd let him be a backbencher in Kent, he'd be a backbencher in Kent to this day.
Is it too late for them to do that deal?
It is too late, and it's like he whenever I appear on his show, it's me and there's a Tory normally, and I can always gang up with him on the Tory. He clearly hates the Tories more than he hates Labour, because they insulted him, and we know how much honour and sense of being dishonoured is actually a huge power. Resentment's a huge power in politics, because it's an engine that never loses its fuel.
And it's their voters he wants, right?
Yeah. And he knows them. He's also a very, very happy, like, you never see him without smiling, without a beer or a fag. Like, he's a man who enjoys life. And most modern political leaders are so dour. And
yes, that's what I was going to use.
How you've got the basic message is you've got no idea how hard it is to be a government.
It's a very serious and unhappy business.
Yes, that's right. And I'm unhappy in this business, and I'm going to make sure you, the voters, are unhappy too.
Speaking of dour people, though, this will show to what extent I'm paying attention. Rupert Lowe.
Yeah.
Do you think that this restore effort on the far right is going to fracture the far right? Is it to be rude, a fart in a bottle and no one gives a shit? Or is it going to turn into a party of some little consequence and splinter the right?
So I think it's real because once again, it's driven by resentment, but it's also driven by the dynamic on the right seems to be driving it further and further right. So the Tories, having been eaten by Reform, they want to be more like Reform, whereas actually they should go back to the centre ground. Like all the votes are really in the centre ground, so they should detach themselves and define the other guys. But in the end, in politics, with your opponents, you need to decide whether you want to bury them or marry them. And the Tories can't decide whether they want to bury or marry Reform. Reform want to bury the Tories. Rupert Lowe wants to bury Reform. It plays into a space where there is the American billionaire funding, tech bro funding, has socialized far more far-right opinions in the UK and UK politics. Elon Musk thinks that Nigel Farage is a race traitor. And so,
yes, because he wouldn't embrace the principle of remigration.
Yes.
All the ethno-nationalists have gone over to Restore.
Yeah.
But does that leave Reform looking, dare I say it, a bit more moderate?
It does, but it also, part of the policy response of Reform is, don't underestimate our seriousness. We want to detain and deport 2 million people. There's a race for definition. And the thing about the UK is we have a very powerful parliament. The powers of the Crown are exercised by Parliament and not hampered by the Human Rights Act because Parliament retained the legal power to override the Human Rights Act.
Well, you could just set it aside.
Yeah, so you can Reform understand that, and so they do want to restore the right of executive detention so the government can order the police to detain somebody, and they want to deport. So they're actually logically thinking through this, and they're preparing for government. They're preparing much more than the Labour Party did to use the powers of government to execute their will. There has been an interesting drift, which is Farage was at 28, 29 and has drifted down to 24, 25. That shows there's a top being taken off that vote in some way. And the Tory party trying to push into that space and Restore push into that space is a fragmentation of that vote. So the Labour Party does need to reunite its own block of votes, but see that continued fragmentation on the right. Because in a way, if you think of it in left politics, you can never out-trot a trot. And that's what Rupert Lowe's party emerging is like. Reform aren't extreme enough. Reform are moderates. Reform are...
Yeah.
And that has
Rupert's
an energy.
The real deal.
Yeah, and that has an energy in itself. Because the ultimate problem is... Nigel Farage said sensibly, in my view, that Tommy Robinson, who's a well-known right-wing far-right agitator in the UK politics, was not welcome as a member of his party, which I took at the time as being a sign he was a respectable conservative. Not my tribe and not my views, but he believed that all good parties, strong parties, have fences, and some people are in and some people aren't. But that has outraged the always online right, and who have a disproportionate influence on discourse. But that fragmentation is real, and he's lost the top of his vote, which means that a Labour Party that was back at, say, 25% would be in the game. And Labour was at 25% only a year ago, last October at Labour Party conference, when Keir Starmer was first bothered by Andy Burnham. Labour were only on 25%, which looked terrible because we'd lost a third of our vote. It looks quite good now that we've lost half our vote.
It's probably a good segue to actually, before I do, just one side note. I was sick in bed on Monday, feeling sorry for myself with the man flu, and when I am unwell, I just resort to soup and then watching old BBC sort of spy dramas. And I was watching, remember the TV show Spooks?
Oh, yeah, superb show.
What exactly is going on with the far right in UK politics right now is season 4, episode 3, which was recorded in 2003 or something. So very Nostradamus of the writers there, because it's literally happening right now. As I'm watching, and because I'm sick and I'm on these drugs, I'm going, have I just woke up and watched, am I watching Sky News right now? No, this is definitely a drama. These are actors. Okay, good segue into what's going on with the Labour Party right now. And I don't even know where to begin. But I guess I want to ask you, John, to begin with, because I sort of said to you, are we going to have a leadership spill or not? Maybe it's worthwhile just for the Australian audience to understand the mechanics of what happens first, and then we can start to sort of unpack all the characters and all that kind of stuff.
So traditionally, the Labour Party in the UK hasn't rolled its leaders. The only person they've ever driven out of office is the most successful Labour leader ever, Tony Blair. If you fail, the Labour Party love you to death and try to keep you.
We are a very sentimental movement.
And in an attempt to tidy up the party rules, last year, the year before, 24, conference 24, Number 10 Downing Street were too clever by half. They thought by creating a 20% level for the number of nominations required, nobody would ever get 25% to challenge. But they tidied the rules up so that it used to be, until 2024, you could only launch a leadership challenge once a year, and you could only launch it at annual conference. And they took that requirement out, so you can launch a leadership challenge any day of every week of every month in the year. If you get 20%, you get 80 MPs to back you. And that's actually a low threshold. And when you've got 411 MPs, it's not hard to find 80 people who feel passed over, whose genius has not been recognised.
Oh, I reckon it might be harder than you think. Have you ever tried to collect petitions? Speaking as someone who has, it's not as easy as you think.
No, I know.
Lifelong enemies are reluctant to put their pen to paper.
No, I know. It's that is true. There's something about not being the first person to draw blood.
That's what you said earlier about everyone holding hands when they jump.
But there is a situation that if you get 80 MPs and a candidate nominated, there has to be an election contest. The National Executive Committee have no choice. They have to call an election because the existing leader, is automatically on the ballot. So a challenger creates a challenge, and the leader's on the ballot. And a lot of the pre-preparation for where we are now was Downing Street and Keir's team trying to make sure that Andy Burnham wasn't an MP. Because if you're not an MP, you can't be a candidate. You can't be a candidate if you're in the House of Lords. You've got to be a member of Parliament, a member of the lower house, in the House of Commons. So that is why earlier this year they blocked him from standing in a by-election he would definitely have won. And that is the by-election, which, going back to your theme, David, was exactly a choice between which candidate, which party can beat reform. Labour ceded the ground, and if you block a local hero, people are going to respond against the party. Yeah. And they voted Green, and it gave the Greens.
And I thought Reform were red hot to win that. Actually, I thought they were a real chance.
They had a strong chance, but they put up their candidate. It's a sidebar. The Reform candidate, Matthew Goodwin.
Yeah, I've read and watched a lot of him.
He clearly hates the public. It's like,
well, it's horses for courses. It wasn't his course, was it?
He's a lecturer at the University of Kent in Canterbury. Like, he's not, I guess, but who claimed his granny once stopped off the train in Manchester. And the issue of the framing of British politics around who can beat reform started then, but it was actually who can save Keir. Well, if we keep this guy out. But as you know, the country, voters, the party has a broad sense of fair play, and it didn't seem fair And probably the best thing that's ever happened to Andy Burnham's political career was being blocked, because maybe he'd have lost Reform, maybe they'd have chosen a better candidate, but it's now in no doubt that he'd have won, and the Green surge would have ended, and that there'd be so many more councillors representing the Labour Party. And look, the thing about moments in political, sometimes your moment doesn't come. Andy's has come, and he's rolled the dice. He rolled the dice to put himself forward to stand, knowing he'd be pushed back, and he was. He's rolling the dice to stand in a very strong Reform seat in Wigan, Makerfield. And so it feels like he's decided that he can meet the moment. And it's an important thing in politicians' life when they have that energy for the challenge that there is. And so it feels like he'll get elected, not easily, but resoundingly. And he comes into Parliament, and it's like, that the Greens would vote for him as a progressive leader. He's not Starmer. I know now that Reform voters, working class Reform voters, would come back to him because he can answer some of their economic challenges. And then it's like, well, should there even be a contest? Shouldn't the Prime Minister just go hand over at Labour Party conference?
Well, except here's the thing. What if he loses it? I mean, I've seen a lot of modelling that describes this as, there's no such thing as a safe Reform seat because they haven't been around long enough. But if there was one, this would be it, right?
Yeah.
Reform are very, very strong in this part of the electorate. The nightmare scenario must be that he runs. Streeton, of course, has come out and helpfully suggested rejoining the European Union just in case there was some working class sentiment coming back towards Andy. And you go, Keir, is Keir going to start banging on doors? I doubt it.
No, I know.
The nightmare scenario has to be he actually loses the seat.
Sure. Wes Streeting is supporting Andy, but in a similar way that a noose supports a hanged man, I think. It is.
If he had one life to give for his country, to be Andy's.
What I think. Andy's from that place, as he showed. I think you guys have both seen his first party election broadcast. He's from Wigan. He sent his kids to school in a local school in Wigan. When he stood for the local seat of Lee, he was backed by some of the most famous rugby league players who knew him and liked him. The video is worth a look. It's a campaign video aimed at journalists, probably not at real voters, but it shows the warmth with which he's greeted. Whenever I've been with him in a pub anywhere in the country, someone wants a selfie with him. He's got warmth and charisma. And the number that matters to me is, I think I mentioned earlier, 2% of Reform voters would consider voting Labour. 20% of Reform voters would consider voting for Andy Burnham. And if you look at the breakdown of the seat, in the local elections, it was 50% Reform, 26% Labour. But if you take off that 20%, then it becomes 40%, 36%. And then it becomes ground game, meeting people. Like, it becomes a proper contest. It is an uphill struggle, but I kind of think sometimes in politics you need to show your strongest hand at the very first obstacle. If he doesn't win this, Labour have to have a complete think about what they do. If he can do this, then he stands a chance of bringing what is a Labour tradition together, the old social democratic but Labour tradition, not a socialist tradition, but one of the organised working class, the intellectual middle classes, the environmentally inclined. And one of the things I really feel strongly about the Labour Party, and Corbyn got this wrong, is Labour's never been a socialist party. Labour's always been a Labour party. And Labour parties are much more like each other than they're like socialist parties. The continent's got socialist parties, but the closest party to Labour outside the ALP is probably the Norwegian Labour Party. That is essentially, I suppose I sum it up like, you can't live with the unions, but you can't live without them either. And that intimate connection between the organised working class and all sides of the union movement have come behind Andy as well. So there's something here of trying to recreate a social democratic but a Labour politics for.
I heard a joke the other day, which is set in a pub in Manchester.
Yeah.
And a Blairite, a Brownite, and a Corbynista walk into the pub, and the publican says, "Hi, Andy, what can I get you?"
I know.
The joke being that, like, he's been. I mean, where is he on the political spectrum? It sounds like every tendency in Labor feels like he's with them.
Yeah, and look,
that can sometimes be a great thing, of course.
And my advice to Andy is he needs to be able to tell a story that accounts for that. He may not think it's fair, but it's what people say. So you need to tell the story of your journey. And I think the pivot point for him was he realized in the scandal over Hillsborough and the police lying and the cover-up about who caused the deaths of the football fans, that was the moment he confronted really head on that there is a failure of the state that you need to acknowledge before you can deal with when you're in government. You can't simply say, we're Labour, we'll control the government and everything will be fine. There are institutions within the state that need deep reform. And I think that was a moment for him when he realised that there's something deeply at odds between the people of the country and the institutions of the country. And that led him to go to Manchester to be the greatest Manchester mayor. Obviously, he didn't want to be in the Corbyn shadow cabinet. And it led him to create a politics which is an interventionist politics, a state-led politics, but one in which he wants to enhance democracy and shape the state to intervene. So for more socialising, more councillizing, but also for bringing back some of the utilities that have been privatised. So there's something in his personal politics that changed, but he's never fully told that story. And for me, one of the great powers in politics is telling stories. And it's shown by the fact that if you don't tell stories about yourself, people for sure tell stories about you. Yes. And the best stories against you are jokes, because people remember them when they're funny. And that's a funny one.
Angela Rayner hasn't figured in your calculations?
So,
anecdotally, I understand she's wildly popular with Labor rank and file.
She's massively popular rank and file. She is currently the third most unpopular politician in the UK. Keir Starmer is the most unpopular. Rachel Reeves, the Chancellor, second most unpopular, and then Angela. And the cloud over her was the error she made in her tax affairs, and that she's been cleared
just yesterday, I think, wasn't it?
By the HMRC, which is great. She now has to clear herself in the court of public opinion, so she has to be seen more as an active. And she's basically been very good. She's not been in active politics. She's now back. But also, there's a thing about your time. If the best time for Angela to become leader of the Labour Party was when Keir Starmer became leader, and Angela ran for deputy, not for leader. I think if she won, it would have been tight, but she'd have beaten Keir. And in a way, that might have been a more honest answer for the party, because Keir ran as though he was a Corbynite and then ditched all the promises that made the Corbynites vote for him. And that puts a dishonesty at the heart of your politics. And his politics are closer, actually, to Ed Miliband's, and always have been, than they were to Corbyn's. But to run and say you're going to nationalise everything and then dump it and move on, there was something in the core of the relationship between him and the party. Angela didn't run. There's all kinds of reasons why you don't run. But her chance was then. And she, like, the one thing about, I think, the leadership contenders, whether you put in Angela, whether you put in Ed, whether you consider with the Wes and Andy, they're broadly in agreement about a lot of things. They're definitely in agreement about the failures of the Starmer government, and they're not that far apart on their solutions. So they have to distinguish themselves. And I think that by and large, to be honest, Wes will be quite happy serving. I said this to the BBC. Wes will be happy serving in a Burnham cabinet, and Burnham will be happy serving in a Wes cabinet. So they're not brutally at each other's throats. This is not a fight over the soul of the Labour Party. It's a fight about who is the best placed to bring Labour back together and defeat reform. Everything does come back to your initial framing and your question, David. I think that's a very acute perception about where the politics are. We have to deal with the fragmentation, pull things back together.
Well, let me repay the compliment. You said something to me a little while ago which really struck a chord when you said this is the sort of the Ulstification of UK politics, and we were talking about flags.
Yeah.
And I was trying to think about this in the context of the disaster that has become the Starmer government, to be brutally frank about it.
Yeah.
In the immediate aftermath of being elected Prime Minister, he was at plus 11 in terms of approval. And by October of 2024, he was at minus 38. And what happened in those months? Well, of course, the answer is Southport happened.
Yeah.
And I suspect what I'm about to say will be very unpopular with you, but I think the British Labour Party completely mishandled Southport and its aftermath. And I think describing everyone who protested as a far-right thug was an error of judgment. And, there's that saying, you might not be interested in the culture wars, but the culture wars are interested in you. And I feel like British politics has become the epicentre of a culture war in which the British Labour Party is barely participating. To what extent do you think the British Labour Party can seize the moment and steer the United Kingdom away from this Ulstification of politics, where the political system just seems to be throwing catnip to the far right every single day of the week?
For me, the straightforward point about Ulstification is flags have now become the identity of your politics and your tribe in British politics. And it wasn't started after Southport. It was started, in my view, after the Brexit referendum, when people who are Remainers, people who want to stay in the European Union, want to reverse the referendum. And if there's one thing worse than a referendum result that you oppose, it is reversing a referendum result because you oppose it. Referendums are fundamental, and you have to respect them. And when you lose, you have to respect them even more. I often hear people saying that politics is downstream from culture. Culture is downstream from economics. I'm a materialist and a Marxist in that sense. The economic substructure is what determines the superstructure. Culture is part of the superstructure. And almost everything in British politics can be explained by the fact for 20 years we've not had a pay rise.
Sure, but that sense of economic despair, that sense of economic angst about the future has been turned into fuel for the far right, not for social democrats.
Well,
it's the far right that are talking about migration and housing stress and illegal immigrants.
That is fair, except again, if you broaden this, in my view, the British voter has voted for over a decade for a break with neoliberal governance. The vote in 2016 for Brexit was a vote to actually change the way the country was governed and the economic model which drove the government.
I would say it was a vote against migration.
I disagree with that, because if it was a vote against migration, it's a vote against white Catholics. Which is a reversion to a very old form of conservatism. But that Brexit vote was, it was after the GFC. We'd had the first lost 10 years of growth. And I think, look, Corbyn tried this. The left tried to capture this with Corbyn, and Corbyn got the highest proportion of votes for the Labour Party for decades. He got a higher proportion of the vote than Tony Blair did. Because his manifesto in 2017 was genuinely a thoughtful, interesting socialist attempt to rethink the way he ran the economy. It was the most worked through, and it's still worth a read, because it was the wrong answers, but it was the right questions, and it's important to get the questions right. And then you get Starmer's actual campaign manifesto, campaign slogan, change. What he did was he took the winter fuel payment, a couple £100 away from 9 million pensioners. Now, whatever you think about 9 million pensioners, most of them got grandkids. And when you say, what did the Labour government do when it came in? You never say it settled the teachers' pay dispute, settled the doctors' pay disputes, paid workers fairly. And you say it took away money from my nan. That's what your change means. And that, for me, branded the Labour Party.
Well, you're forgetting about free gear Keir. Do you remember that scandal? That, I think, did more harm than people might acknowledge.
Free gear Keir, and look, there's a line from that.
In September of 24, £107,000 worth of free stuff.
And look, and I think you...
From Baron Ali.
Lord Ali, yeah.
Lord Ali, yeah.
Their titles are Baron, but they're always called Lord for some reason. I've got no idea why.
I will leave the peerages to you.
Because they're not baronetcies. They're not inheritable. But anyway, I know slightly too little and too much at the same time about this. But look, the biggest risk in politics, as you know, is in opposition trying to be holier than thou.
Yeah.
I thought that was a well-deserved clip round the ear for saying we have high... You didn't need to say...
We're going to be better than the Tories, yeah.
All you needed to say was, do you know what? When we put you in your homes and don't let and close your pubs, we won't be drinking behind the door. Because...
yes.
It's like, but no, you get yourself into this because you sort of believe you're holier than thou. And it's like, I'll come to Southport now. The core problem with Keir Starmer is he denies who he is. He is a securocrat. Probably his greatest achievement in the public service is not reforming the Department of Public Prosecutions, which he did really well. And is a better prosecutor of rape and got higher conviction rates and all those things. His best and most constructive contribution to public service was turning the RUC into the Northern Ireland Police Service. And that has been done in a way which has made a better police service for all the communities in Northern Ireland. But what he took from that was he actually was most comfortable when he's a securocrat. The defense, security, intelligence world is where he's at. So, Ukraine, he knew what to do. I'm cutting international aid. We're going to spend it on defense. We're going to be with Zelensky. We're going to create European structures for defense security. No hesitation. On Northern Ireland, he insanely, in my view, holds a policy which is not Labour Party policy. He says where there are a border poll, he would campaign for Northern Ireland to stay in the United Kingdom, which is against party policy. Party policy is a free vote and a choice. So, but his instinct is when he speaks instinctively, it's really interesting. And so to go to Southport, he said what he meant is if you riot and you try to burn people to death, and if you riot and to get access to hotels to burn people to death, you try to kill police officers, you are going to jail. And he sent them to jail so quickly because he knew how you organize the court system, the police system and everything, people to go straight through. And it was a time when there weren't prison places, but he managed the system. That was great. From my point of view, what he failed to see was the social movement side of this. Because yes, there was this energy on the far right. It was on the internet and social media. It was in demonstrations. Yeah. It was in riots. There was a massive energy on the progressive side of politics, people doing counter demonstrations. And Labour MPs were told not to go to meet them, not to participate with them. That was a massive movement of people, an insurgence of people who wanted to oppose racism and wanted to oppose violence against asylum seekers and refugees. But Labour wouldn't make organic links with it, wouldn't draw it in. And I think that was a space, you see it now looking backwards, it's a space where the Greens got some energy from. They went and were amongst them.
But so too did Reform.
Yeah, no.
I mean, by labelling everyone who's got an anxiety about immigration and cultural change as a far-right thug, I fear that Keir Starmer gifted Reform and others constituencies.
But Keir Starmer,
he should never have done. And I mean, 1,200 individuals were arrested in the aftermath, and there's literally a cavalcade of cases you can look at on the internet. Lucy Connolly, 41, posted, "Did not care if asylum seeker hotels were burnt down," deleted the tweet 4 hours later, 31 months prison. Like there's a caravan of these cases.
Lucy Connolly pled guilty at trial. If you plead guilty at trial and then complain you got a sentence, I mean, you're probably not working in the same world.
Well, I mean, she could have been sent to Australia a couple of hundred years ago. I mean, my point is that the politics of this got away from Labor.
But didn't it begin, though? Wasn't the problem, and, John, you and I have spoken about this on the show before, was that Labor got elected initially because, and I'm generalising here, but because it was like anyone but the Tories. And obviously they inherited a mess, but they never came in there with a platform. They never came in there with I know you have a party platform and manifesto, but like there was no North Star.
No plan.
Yeah, exactly. There was no plan to and a sense of ideas about who this government is, who we are, what we are about. So therefore, there was this foundation about, well, this is how we are going to govern. This is the type of government we are going to be. We know who we are. And I often wondered if it was a crisis of ideas or a crisis of leadership. And now I'm starting to think it's actually been both. And I look at the way that a lot of the Labor MPs after the local council elections were on, all of the talking heads. And my God, there are so many in the UK that you could go on. My Twitter feed was just overwhelmed with so many different MPs. But they were all getting asked similar questions about, well, what does Labor do now? And they were saying, look, we're listening. Voters want real change. And when they got pressed on it, they didn't have any answers. And I was just thinking, shit, none of you guys know what the fuck you're supposed to do in government. And so I'm looking at these new potential leaders, whether it be Andy Burnham or Wes Streeting, or if it's clearly not the Prime Minister, or Angela Rayner, or even the recycle Ed Miliband. Do any of these guys actually know, one, what they stand for, two, have a plan for how they can actually fix Britain's problems and know how to go about executing it?
And develop some momentum. I mean, isn't there an urgent need for some momentum?
Yeah. The problem that Labor has had is there's been really successful political entrepreneurs on the right, and they've killed the Conservative Party. And they've taken energy that was expressed in criminal form and prosecuted, and energy expressed in other forms, but they've turned it into a story. They've turned it into a story and a movement with momentum, and they've had an aim to replace the Tories. The Labour Party, was losing votes every single day of the election. Had the election gone on for a week longer, Labour would have been a minority government, not a massive landslide majority. So it was a loveless landslide, but it was a landslide that was constrained by having no plan for government and having no plan for a plan. And those unite themselves in the person of Keir Starmer, who we could have a whole separate conversation about the role his Chief of Staff, Morgan McSweeney, played. Morgan was, as one single Chief of Staff, was one voice in Number 10. Unlike under Tony Blair, where there was a Chief of Staff, Jonathan Powell, who ran the government, there was a Chief Communications person, Alistair Campbell, who was the spokesperson, shaped the narrative, David Miliband, who shaped the policy, Sally Morgan, who shaped the direction of the party. A lot of figures who contest with each other and share things. There's a whole lesson for how you create your staff in office. But the staffing in office never works if the person at the core doesn't have a gut instinct, which is why I was talking about him being a securocrat. I think you can identify gut instincts, and there's two of them. One is he totally agrees with Ed Miliband on greening the economy, and he was the last big cut that Labour did to be respectful was to cut £28 billion of investment in the green economy, the green transition, which actually could have been a massive investment in the northern working class constituencies, could have been signed quite early, of doing things, changing, creating creating renewable energy in the north with new jobs and all kinds of things. They took that away. So Keir was reduced to being a manager. But in the campaign, what do you do in a campaign? You close down indisciplined voices. Fair enough. You want people to just say, vote Labour for change. The hope is that behind the scenes, there is a change program being developed. And coming into government, the most disappointed people were the civil servants, senior civil servants, who went, well, what's your plan? And they didn't have a plan. And that in a more fundamental arc is you need to have short, medium and long-term change. So what could you do if I was coming in to be advisor to either of the two candidates? The first thing I'd do is I'd nationalise Thames Water, our privatised utility in London South East. It charges high prices, has got high debt, and says to the regulator, we can't actually have water as clean as you want unless you let us raise prices even more than you're letting us. And it's kind of like, basically, they're telling us they're trading bankrupt, just nationalise them. Like, you have to use the power of the state to say the state stands for something. I think people learn from COVID. The state is incredibly powerful. And there's not been a real backlash about that. There's been more of a demand for it. It's like, the state proved it can lock us up in our homes, stop us seeing our friends, close our pubs, close our restaurants, give us money to keep us in our jobs, give our companies money. Huge power. So why can't you sort housing? Why can't you? So the demand for faster movement is a real one because they've seen people move quickly in the pandemic.
Hasn't one of the constraints, though, on Labor's creativity been the state of the budget and the economy? I mean, you've got debt at 103% of GDP, a government that's spending more than its revenue, an economy that's growing very sluggishly, as you said earlier, wages growth very low, unemployment rising now at persistent interest rates. This is not. I mean, that doesn't look like the kind of economy that wants to.
No, I know, but so if you step back, it's a very unpopular government because it did stupid, unpopular things. It's a government that did stupid, unpopular things that weren't in the manifesto. Taking away money from pensioners was not in the manifesto. Trying and failing to take away money from pensioners wasn't in the manifesto. Appointing a man who spent the night in a convicted paedophile's home while the home was free because the convicted paedophile was serving a sentence for trafficking girls for prostitution, that wasn't in the manifesto. Appointing him, Peter Mandelson, as the ambassador,
with hindsight, probably an error.
Yeah, with foresight, an error, because it had been known for over a year that he'd stayed in his house. So it's like it was forced through, and there's an interesting thing for me, which is if you just go back to the manifesto and stick to that, you can do popular things if you're not ashamed of them. So if you bring in rent rights for renters, you actually and talk about them, then people go, well, you're actually trying to help us in cost of living, help us. If you build some houses, you can have a story about how I'm helping you now. But the attack that Keir Starmer chose to make on the Greens in the local election campaign was the Greens hate landlords. And it's like, well, who doesn't? It's like, but if you bring in regulation in favour of renters and you go, what I really care about is these landlords. It's like, who is friends with their landlord?
The oppressed landlord class.
You know, it's like exactly this oppressed class. They're going to go the way of the kulaks if we're not careful.
Yes, that's right.
So there's something about a lack of pride in the intervention of government. So you can do things and be proud of them is one element of it. And there's also, Rachel Reeves is unpopular because look at the core of it, Keir Starmer and Rachel are not good communicators. And you cannot have your two most powerful politicians, neither of them able to talk to the public. When that happens, that's really problematic. So what Rachel actually done? She's spent £100 billion extra on public services, £40 billion extra on capital investment. And our last budget, she raised taxes because she was not going to cut capital investment. The commitment of this government is 5 years Labour government, 5 years uninterrupted capital investment. That's a fundamental element of investment for growth. The Tories always, when they were in a tight corner, cancel something. And so you stop, start. It's just, now, what do you do about the markets? Well, one issue the Tories had was that they were told for the entire last 3 years of them being in government, debt was 100% of GDP. Debt was 96% of GDP for all that period, the recalculated figures looking back. 96% is a lot different from 100 in terms of your movement. And your
103 as it now is.
Well, it's not clear because it was 96 when we were told it was 100. It's not clear it is 103 now. But the simplest things to do are, one, say that it's at the next election you will stop the automatic increase in the age pension, which is what's called the triple lock here, which you rise with the highest of 2.5% inflation or wages, which is just a ratchet that goes up. If you do that, you immediately take the biggest growing pressure in public spending, which is the increase in the welfare budget, but it's the only bit of the welfare budget increasing in real terms is the money for pensioners. So you take
but while you're explaining that, there'll be a right-wing populist explaining to the British people how X billions are being spent putting asylum seekers up in luxury hotels down on the beachfront.
The truth about those hotels, and again, I know when you're explaining.
I'm not accusing the far right of being associated with the truth.
No.
But I am accusing them of knowing how to ram a message.
So many hotels are now going out of business because there's no asylum seekers in them anymore. They were the fag end of the accommodation industry in the UK. But no, you can reassure the markets with simple policy changes, which give you the headroom for continuing to spend £100 billion extra and £40 billion extra on capital. That within this, and then look, you have to have. What does Andy do? What does Andy do in Manchester? He went, buses are the most important thing for people who don't have cars to get to work. If I cap the fares and I bring them back under local council control, that makes a difference. Now, those are visible things. The thing about buses can change tomorrow. You and I could change a bus route if we ran a city. And there's something about sequencing that everything we do is about jam tomorrow. People need jam yesterday as well as jam today. And there are ways in which you get the sequencing right by big and small things. But the big things that are far off have to have a small thing now that you can see as the building block, the foundation, the first step towards. And it's the inability
and telling a story.
Yes. The inability to tell a story is the fundamental failure of this government. And the ones who could tell a story, who did do things like Angela Rayner, were in a way constrained and held away from being the spokespeople people wanted.
Definitely a British podcast now. If we're talking about bus routes, who's going to win, John? Who's going to win the leadership challenge?
Andy Burnham at a trot, in my view. If you look at the polling of party members, Andy's the only one that's really positively seen by party members. Keir isn't, Rachel isn't, Angela isn't, Wes isn't. Wes, for me, Wes is a young man. Wes is a young man who has got at least one more attempt to become leader. He is a great communicator, and one of the things he's got, we touched on it with the joke about Andy, that's not Wes's joke, but Wes is a funny man, and he's always witty at his own expense, like he makes fun of himself, and that's a huge communication device. Humor gets your point across, and not being up yourself, and knowing you're in formation. And I think, Wes will play a big role in an Andy administration. And I would have thought a smart thing for Andy to do would be, if he wins the by-election, then he shows he can do the things, bring together the coalition. He can reach the parts that other peers can't reach.
Will Keir Starmer serve in Andy's government? Would he be a foreign minister?
Well, I'd suggested that earlier in the year. In January, I said that would be a good move because it plays exactly to his, and that the deal should be done between him. I mean, the ideal deal in a way would be Andy gets elected. He announces he'll run with Wes Streeting as his deputy prime minister, but that he would have Keir Starmer as a foreign minister, and then everyone just moves around. And you don't have a contest. You just move smoothly into a new administration. Nobody's done that, which is not a reason you shouldn't do it, because we live in unprecedented times. And so Cameron came back as a Lord to be the Foreign Secretary, and that worked really well.
But I wonder if the level of antipathy for Starmer amongst the British public means that there is some, you do need to tear him down. It's not a kind thing to say, but gee whiz, there are crowds of people on. He seems to unite Greens and unite the Kingdom rallies in a way that no other cause can.
Sorry, John, before you answer, David, by tearing him down, do you mean just a contest in which he gets belted?
I do.
Yeah, okay.
When your Prime Minister's name is a punchline, you need to do something really visible. When at soccer matches, football matches, people chant, Starmer is a wanker. You can't go, but he's our wanker. You've got to actually go, you've got a point.
Yeah, so people talk about stormtroopers instead of police. It's
you still need some brutality in politics. What the Andy Prime Ministership says, I am the change you wanted. And you can't go, but let's keep these guys around. Let's keep Rachel as Chancellor and Keir and
That's right. It does have to be a change of management.
Yeah, and you can't. It's like one of the things which I criticised Keir Starmer wrote in an FT article I wrote about his response to the locals, the defeats in Wales and Scotland, was he always says, I take responsibility, but he never explains what it was that went wrong, why it went wrong, and what changes he's made so it will never go wrong like that again in the future. Same with Mandelson. He never actually says what went wrong, why I made a change that will mean it never happens again. And
I heard the joke was that when he says, I'm going to take responsibility, that's when his senior staff know one of them's going to get shot.
Yeah, that's exactly right. I'm going to take responsibility, and now it's your turn.
I'm going to take responsibility and shoot him.
It's a very bitter pill for me to swallow, but I will have to do it. After all, I am the leader.
Yeah.
Yes, that's right.
Well, I'm going to take some responsibility and wrap this wonderful conversation up because John's got a day ahead of him of work. Thank you so much for your time on the podcast today. I really do appreciate it. Obviously, there's a lot to unpack over the most recent elections, and there's so much more we could have talked about.
Yeah.
But, we do appreciate your time today.
And lovely to talk to you again.
And obviously to you, David, as well. Thank you so much for your contribution today. And we'll see you next week for another episode of the Feeney Files with Jesse McCrone.
And David, so great to be on with you because I had to answer some listeners' questions, and I felt unfair doing some of them, not having a proper discussion with you about them, because I think it's a richer conversation when you actually try and unpack the complexity rather than go, that's a terrible view. All right, cheers.
Fight the good fight.
Cheerio.
Yeah, and the bad one too.
Hey, Social Democrats. Thanks for listening. Today's episode was hosted by myself, Stephen Donnelly, and produced by Grace Eyre. If you like the show, please rate us and review us wherever you get your podcasts. And if you really like the show, then join our Patreon community for early and ad-free access to each episode. We regularly take questions and comments from our Patreon members, so get in there if you want to have your say. And finally, get all the latest updates and bonus content by following Socially Democratic on our social media channels. The links are in our show notes. See you next Friday.